Good evening, everybody. All right, well, thanks for joining us, all of you here in the room, all of you online, there. Thanks for joining us. So welcome to the Royal Society of Edinburgh. We're here as part of the Curious Festival, which has been taking place over these few weeks. And just before we dive into what we're going to do, just to say, as we always have to do, a little bit of health and safety. If there's a problem, we go out the front door, go over to the dome. Okay, so you kind of follow this guideline here, but if there's a problem, we go out, go to the dome. Okay, so we're going to talk about dinosaurs today, and just to, we're going to have plenty of time for questions and a chat, and just to know you guys online, you have an opportunity to ask questions as well. So please do put your questions into the chat box. You can put them in during the talk, and we'll get to them later. Okay, so I'm really glad that you could all join us here tonight. This is a fun thing for us because I'm a paleontologist here at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm here with three of our students. So we have Emma, and we have Adam, and we have Millie that you'll hear from in a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro spiel, and they're going to talk a bit about their research, and then we're going to have a bit of a fireside chat about paleontology, and then we will again give plenty of time for your questions. And the reason that we're doing this talk is because this is a very special year. It's a big round number year for dinosaur research, and that's because just a little over 200 years ago, February 1824, it was an evening, a winter evening instead of an autumn evening, but in the evening in a learned society like this one, but in London, this was the Geological Society. William Buckland, who was a professor at Oxford and a real quirky guy. This was a guy whose life ambition was to eat his way through the animal kingdom. Seriously, he had a pet bear at his house, and he dressed it in academic robes, and so on and so on. He's one of the quirkiest guys of that very quirky era of British science. But Buckland he stood up in front of the room that evening, and he addressed some rumors. And these rumors were that quarry workers in the English countryside, not too far from Oxford, at a place called Stonesfield, that they had been finding giant petrified bones. And those rumors started to percolate and started to spread. And they became, I guess, the 1820s equivalent of like a viral rumor. Okay? And so Buckland stood up that evening in London and said, yes, indeed, it was true. There were these giant petrified bones. One of them right here, an enormous jawbone with a big steak knife serrated tooth sticking out of it. There were others as well, vertebrae from the backbone, limb bones. And these bones indicated that there was a giant reptilian type creature that once lived in Britain but didn't live in Britain any longer. And Buckland gave it a name, and he called it Megalosaurus, the great fossil lizard. And he didn't really know it, but what he was doing at that moment was he was unveiling the very first dinosaur to science. Now, obviously, people have been encountering dinosaur bones for thousands of years. You know, there's Native American stories about finding dinosaur bones, tribes in Central Asia that found dinosaur bones. But this was the first time that a scientist studied bones, realized that they belonged to an ancient group of reptilian creatures that don't live anymore, and gave them a formal scientific name. And this really was the beginning of the dinosaur mania that continues today. And after Buckland announced Megalosaurus, some other types of giant bones started to emerge from the English countryside as well, other species of these great reptiles. And a couple of decades later, this group of giant extinct reptiles was given the name dinosaurs. And they did become a sensation in Victorian England. There was dinomania then. You know, this was the Jurassic Park equivalent back in the Victorian times, this big Crystal Palace exhibition where the first reconstructions of these weird creatures were put on display. And I mean, just think about it. I mean, now dinosaurs are so common to us, but I mean, when this was happening, the whole concept of dinosaurs was new. Imagine that, you know, these giant bones being found in the ground. Nobody really knew what they were. This was all new to Victorian society. Now, we've learned a lot over those last 200 years. That's what we're going to talk about today, and that's especially what Adam and Emma and Millie are going to talk about is their own research and fieldwork and discoveries that they're doing right here as students at the University of Edinburgh. But I want to give a little bit of a background here to the work that we do. And the work that we do here, a large part of it is looking for and describing Scottish dinosaurs and other Scottish fossils. And this is an important year as well, a nice round number year, because it was 40 years ago in 1984 where the very first Scottish dinosaur, that's when the first Scottish dinosaur was found. It's a good year, 1984. Good year. That's when I was born. And so, believe it or not, these dinosaurs are being found in England in the 1820s, and it was only in 1984 that the first one was recognized from Scotland. I'll give you a sense of why that is in a bit. But this first dinosaur from Scotland was a single footprint, a footprint of a giant three-toed dinosaur that fell off a cliff on the Isle of Skye. Literally, found by a geologist and described in this short research paper right there. Now, it took another decade for geologists and scientists on Skye to find the first bones of Jurassic age dinosaurs. And there were actually two found at the same time, a little leg bone from a meat eater about the size of a dog, and then a giant arm bone from one of those long neck plant-eating giant dinosaurs. And these were both announced to quite a lot of fanfare. You can see they were going crazy in the West Highland Free Press back in early 1995, but this was a big deal. These were the first dinosaur bones, and you can tell different things from bones than you can from footprints, and it really corroborated that yes, that was a dinosaur footprint and there were dinosaurs that lived here. Now, over the last couple of decades, we've been finding more and more and more of these Scottish dinosaurs. And I started my career here in Edinburgh in 2013. I came over from America to work here at the university. And a big part of what I wanted to do when I came here was to find Scottish dinosaurs. Probably the best way I felt to integrate into my new country. And so we started going out to the Isle of Skye quite a bit. And the Isle of Skye is one of the only places in Scotland where you can find dinosaurs. And that's just like the dumb luck of geology, of what rocks are preserved where. To get dinosaur fossils, you need rocks that were formed during the age of dinosaurs, where animals could get buried by sand or mud or leave their footprints in the sand or mud, and those things could get turned into fossils. And then those rocks have to be visible today for us to go out and search for fossils in them. And Skye just hits the sweet spot. It happens to have a lot of Jurassic age rocks, mostly fringing the coastlines of this gorgeous landscape. And it really is a stunning place to work. I mean, there's a reason they're filming all these Hollywood blockbusters out there. They're doing all the background footage for a lot of big movies and TV shows on Skye because, that landscape is incredible. Although, obviously, the weather isn't. This is something a lot of us, any of you who've been on Skye, you would know. The beauty of the landscape is not matched by the gorgeousness of the weather. I made the mistake of camping the first time I went, never again. But believe it or not, I swear to you it's true. Back during the Jurassic period, about 170 million years ago, Skye wasn't like that. It was an island. The Atlantic Ocean was just starting to open up because the big supercontinent was starting to split apart. And Skye was part of a subtropical island in the middle of that ocean. So imagine a version of Scotland with weather more like the Mediterranean. And that's what it was like when these dinosaurs were living. Now, everything we find on Skye, whether it's footprints or bones, anything in between, is quite important because as it happens, we know very little about dinosaurs from this middle part of the Jurassic period from anywhere in the world. And that's really, it's just a gap in the fossil record. We have a pretty good understanding of the first dinosaurs that lived way back, 230-ish million years ago in the Triassic period. We know a whole lot about those last dinosaurs, the T-Rexes and Triceratops, the iconic ones, but we don't have a lot of knowledge of what was going on in between. And that's where Skye actually is very globally important. And that's why we go quite often, and we bring our students out, and we use this as a nice field laboratory to teach our students all kinds of field techniques and collecting techniques. And we have students that come from all over the world to study with us. You'll, of course, meet a few of them in a few moments. But we have a master's course here that gets students particularly from all over the world that Rachel Wood and I, some of you know Rachel Wood, who's an eminent professor at the university. We run this master's course. We've had students from all over come and study with us. And Sky is a big draw for that. Now, I could go on and on about Sky, but I want to just do a little whistle stop, a bit of storytelling, if I can, to tell you about a few of the discoveries we've made over the years, just to give you a sense of what dinosaurs used to live here in Scotland. And apologies to some of you in the audience, definitely you've seen me do this probably several times. And the same with some of our students who are here. But forgive me, I'm just going to review the basics of Sky dinosaurs. And I'm going to mention something that we found here. This was our first big discovery, really, after I moved to Edinburgh. And I went out to Sky with Tom Challens, my good friend, who's a fellow paleontologist. We went out to this place called Duntullum. On the far northeastern tip of the island, there's the ruins of a 14th century castle up there. Of course there is. Of course there is. And it's a really cool old ruin of the castle. I'm actually up by that castle taking this photo, looking across the beach. You'll notice that blue sky. Yeah, so like why in the world are we not taking advantage? Why are we up on the cliff taking photos? Why aren't we looking for fossils? Well, the problem is it's high tide. It's high tide, and we have to wait for the tide to go down to reach most of the fossil sites. So when the tide goes down, this turns into a rock platform that juts out about 100 meters or so into the very cold water. And a geologist friend of ours had found a tiny little jawbone there, tiny, just about an inch long. And so that got us very excited. We knew that there were fossils there, so we hoped maybe there'd be a skull, maybe there'd be a skeleton. We looked all day on our hands and knees. We didn't really find anything. And it was frustrating, but that's the reality. Emma's going to tell you a little bit more about fieldwork because she's been on some big adventures this summer, digging up fossils. The reality is we spend a lot of time looking for sites, and there's a lot of failure. It's not just we find dinosaurs everywhere. When you find a site and you can sit down and start excavating it, then it's different. Then the bones can really, come out of the ground. But we spend a lot of time prospecting, looking, not finding anything. That's the reality of it. And this was shaping up to be one of those days. And as we were walking back to our cars, we started to look at these rock pools, full of seaweed and algae and limpets and all the normal stuff of the Scottish seaside. And Tom and I were just commenting on them, and we started to notice that there was a bit of a pattern. Maybe you can see it there. There's a bit of a left-right zigzagging pattern. It's like, are we seeing something? Are we seeing something, or are we just, are we hallucinating? Well, we took a closer look, and we saw that some of these holes were filled in with a harder rock that formed a cast. And actually, they weren't just circles. Some things stood out. There's bits on the end, 1, 2, 3, 4. And some of them were paired together, a big horseshoe-shaped one, a smaller crescent-shaped one in front. And then it dawned on us after a few minutes that, wait a minute, we had actually found fossils. We went there to find fossils. We spent all day looking for fossils. We hadn't found anything. It was frustrating. We were looking for small stuff. These were big things that were right in front of our faces. We just didn't realize them until we sat down and thought about them. And what they were footprints and handprints made by giant plant-eating dinosaurs. What we call the sauropod dinosaurs, the Brontosaurus or Diplodocus group. Now, once we found this site, there's over 150 footprints there. We've had a lot of students work on this site and other sites. And my former student, Paige, who came here from America to do her master's and stayed on for her PhD, Paige used drones and other techniques to really map these sites in detail. And that work showed that these giant long-necked dinosaurs were making their footprints as they were wading in shallow water. They were wading through subtropical lagoons. We're talking about very shallow water, maybe a foot deep or something like that. But that's the picture to think about. These giant dinosaurs, ancient Scotland, subtropical island, wading through a lagoon. So that's part of the story. But there's more dinosaurs. These long-necked dinosaurs are just one of many types that we've found. My master's student, Tone, who graduated a year or so ago, he's been going to Sky since he was a teenager. He became obsessed with fossils. And so Tone's gone out and he's done a lot of his own field work. With this field work, he's worked with somebody we've worked with over the years on Sky. That's Doogie Ross, who runs the Staffen Museum on Skye, a museum he literally built with his own hands. Remarkable. The only person I know who has physically, literally built his own museum. And a lot of the Skye fossils go into this museum. And so Tone has also flown a lot of drones and mapped a lot of track sites. And you can see there, he's pointing at a big track of something with 3 toes. And those toes are really sharp. They have sharp points at the end. This is the track of a meat-eating dinosaur, a member of the T-Rex and raptor family, basically, of dinosaurs. Now, Tone also has done a lot of drone work, and this is just a little video he put together just showing a little bit of the scale and the perspective. So there's those two of the meat-eater footprints there, and you can see as the drone's going, you see this is the sort of thing. I mean, these are beaches that are strewn with boulders, with algae, with seaweed. And you're looking for these fossils, trying to pick them out in between all this rubble. And here is another type of footprint. Those are big rounded footprints. Those are made by those giant long-necked dinosaurs. And there's a trackway, and you're walking with them here, and you can see ripple marks left in the sand from the wind and the waves back in the Jurassic period. And so these drone surveys allow us to make really detailed maps. This map here, again, shows some of those 3-toed tracks with the claws that were made by the meat eaters. They show some of the tracks of the plant eaters. And what we have here, again, is an area right near the shoreline back in the Jurassic. Those ripples show there was a little bit of flowing water. So this was right on the beach, basically. And you have these dinosaurs, meat eaters, plant eaters, frolicking about there. And there's many more. There's a beautiful site called Brothers Point on the east coast of the island, where also when the tide goes down, there's a big rock platform that juts out. And that's Paige down there taking some notes on some tracks, some special tracks. We found here tracks that were made by stegosaur dinosaurs, the ones with the plates on their backs, and by early cousins of duck-billed dinosaurs. And these are plant-eating dinosaurs that had beaks at the front of their snouts, kind of like a duck. So basically what we have is an entire ecosystem, a community of Jurassic dinosaurs, the meat eaters, the plant eaters. We have huge plant eaters like the long-necked sauropods. We have smaller plant eaters like the duckbills and the stegosaurs. We have some bigger meat eaters, things that are kind of the size of jeeps down to the size of small dogs, living in these lagoons along the beaches back when Scotland was a subtropical paradise. Now, most of this is known from footprints. The footprints remain much more common than the bones. And I think it's really because in this kind of setting, near the beach, the lagoons, these are just places where a lot of animals live. They made a lot of footprints, and let's face it, how many footsteps do we all take in our lives? Millions, billions, I don't know. We have one skeleton to give. Potentially, we have lots of footprints to give. And so in this kind of setting, near beaches and lagoons where you can get footprints, that's probably why they're more common than the bones. But we do have bones of these groups as well. But we still don't have a single really good, complete skeleton of a dinosaur. However, we do have some skeletons of other things. Now, you might be asking, what was flying around over the heads of these dinosaurs back in the lagoons? Well, we know a little bit about this now because of what's surely our finest discovery. And this was made back in 2017. And I wish for all the world that I could have made this discovery. It would easily be the best discovery of my career, probably would be throughout, in my retirement. But no, it was one of our students. It was Amelia Penny, who was doing her PhD at the time. She's now a lecturer on the faculty in Edinburgh, but she was finishing up her PhD. She actually studied the origin of animals and the origin of reefs, stuff that's like 500, 600 million years old. She came out with us. She hadn't ever really looked for fossil bones before. She was prospecting out in the tidal zone. She saw this thing on the face of one of the rocks, and she realized right away that, this is something. This is something. There's a different color here, this darker brown color, as opposed to that gray limestone around it. It has a shape to it, it has a symmetry to it. There's a bit that comes to a point. There's a row of kind of circular oval things on the side. And it dawned on us that what this was a fossilized head, a fossilized skull of something. What could it be? Well, what has a beak, but also quite a lot of sharp, pointy teeth, and that lived in the Jurassic and lived around lagoons? Well, a pterosaur, a pterodactyl, one of the flying reptiles. Not a dinosaur. Not a dinosaur. If you ever meet my 4-year-old, he will tell you pterodactyls, not dinosaurs. They're cousin dinosaurs. They're a different group of reptiles, closely related to dinosaurs, but not technically dinosaurs. So we started to, with Doogie Ross and his big diamond tip rock saw, started to take this out of the rock, started to cut it out. And as we did so, the rock started to break, started to crack. That started to worry us. And it cracked, a big old piece came off. And we picked up that piece, and it was from behind the head. And lo and behold, there was part of a skeleton on that piece. And that's actually a real photo that was taken of us when we realized we had a skeleton, which was great. We were super excited, but there was a problem. Now it wasn't just removing a little head from the rock, it was removing a big skeleton. And Doogie got out his saw, but we all realized that the tide was coming in very quickly, very quickly. And it was encroaching and encroaching and encroaching. And there's a whole backstory here about how we were delayed and held up with different things, but the sad reality was we stood there and watched that water lap up over the fossil, which just really in the moment, devastated us because we didn't know, this pterodactyls have really fragile bones. Was this fossil, was it just going to be washed away by the tide? It had been there for 170 million years, but because we had started to remove it, those bones were exposed. So we dumped all the glue, everything we had on it as the water was coming up. We hoped for the best. Luckily, this was early June at 57 degrees north latitude, and that meant that we could come back at the next low tide, which was at midnight, but there was enough light. And we went back and we got the saw out again, and it only took about another 10 or 15 minutes to get the thing out. And it looked like some of that glue had held. We were optimistic. We brought the thing up onto the beach. We left it to the next morning. It's really heavy. This thing, I don't know how much it weighs. All of you guys who are in the paleo lab know how huge this thing is. And it took several of us to carry this thing off the beach. We had to get it up to the road, which is about a 20-minute hike. And so luckily we got this mechanical wheelbarrow that one of Doogie's neighbors used that he had. This is a guy named Steve, another guy named Steve, and he's a Glaswegian who did, just the wisest thing you could possibly do. Moved to Skye, wanted to start a cafe, and then he realized he hates the public. So he spent most of his time doing other things. So he helped us get it out. We brought it up the coast, brought it back to the lab, got it cleaned up. And yes, the bones held. They were there. And we have the nearly complete skeleton of a pterodactyl, something that had never been found in Scotland before. And we recruited a PhD student, an excellent PhD student, Natalia, who some of you know, to study it. And Natalia finished her PhD earlier this year. And we gave this a formal description, gave it a name. We called it Yarkskianach, and that's a Gaelic name. We like to do these things when we find fossils here in Scotland that are new and need to have a name, to use Gaelic as a homage to where the fossil was found. And Yarkskianach, apologies to any Gaelic speakers in the audience, but this is Edinburgh, so probably none of you speak Gaelic. I don't know. When we did this on Skye, as some of you know, we went to a school and did an RSE event there a year and a bit ago, and we said, "Does anybody speak Gaelic?" All the kids speak Gaelic. So I said, now you're gonna criticize my pronunciation, and they did. But Yarkskianach, it basically means winged reptile from Skye. And Skye is the winged island in Gaelic, so it kind of works. So that Natalia is a great artist. That's what it would have looked like, soaring overhead of those dinosaurs in the lagoons. A big animal at a wingspan of about 2.5 meters, so 8 feet or so. It's wider than a king-size bed. Yes, it is. So that's really our latest, major discovery. But we keep making discoveries, and for us, they're very inspirational. For me, it's very inspirational, especially moving to this country and just being able to stake out, and start a career here and build a life here, build a lab at the university, but also, to have my family here. My wife, Anne, who some of you know is from England, and we moved around over the years. We were finally able to settle here, which we loved. Her whole family's nucleated here in Edinburgh. And then we have our little Scottish boy, Anthony, and we take him out to Skye. He runs around in the dinosaur tracks, which has been a whole lot of fun. We've taken him there several times, and we have all these photos showing him growing up, getting bigger and bigger with those dinosaur tracks for scale. And this sort of thing inspired Anne, who was a teacher for a long time, but now a children's book author, to write a book about Scottish dinosaurs for kids, which we've had lots of fun going around to schools and book festivals and libraries and museums here in Scotland, reading the book. So that really, I think, goes to show how, we've done this research. It's been a lot of fun. We've trained a lot of students, which has been great. And as we've made our lives and career and family here, we're doing our best to reach out and try to evangelize to Scotland about the dinosaurs that once lived here. All right, that's all that I'm going to say. I'm now going to hand it over to Emma. And Emma is going to talk a little bit about her summer holidays, digging up dinosaurs, and then we're going to hear from Adam and from Millie. So they're going to give some little talks, and we're all going to be up here on the stage for our little fireside chat. So save your applause for this until we're finished, and save your questions. I promise we'll get to all of them later. Same for you guys online. So Emma, take it away.
Oh, hello, I'm Emma, and I'm a final year undergrad student here in Edinburgh. And this summer I had the excellent opportunity to participate in 2 fossil excavations in Central and Eastern Europe. So I spent 2 weeks, there's meant to be text on there. I spent 2 weeks in Kraszów, which is a small village in southern Poland, and then a further just over a week in Yarkut, which is an abandoned ghost village in western Hungary. And both of these sites used to be mines, which have since been decommissioned. And well, while they were still in use as mines, fossils had started turning up from here. So the Polish dig, the Polish site was a late Triassic river environment in which a wide variety of crocodile relatives and giant predatory amphibians were found, which are those animals on that side, and they're supposed to have their names on there, but they don't, unfortunately. And by this river essentially accumulated the bones of all these animals into several bone beds. And the Hungarian site was a late Cretaceous lake in which the bones of a wide variety of different types of dinosaurs, some pterosaurs, and the only known freshwater mosasaur, as well as other almost crocodiles and other vertebrates, were washed in and just deposited at the bottom of this lake. So, and most of the fieldwork was just hammering away for hours and shoveling away excess material for hours. And but then occasionally we would come across a dark-colored bone, like that one up there. And that was always very exciting because it was a very unique feeling when you break open a rock and you just see this bone, this fossil that's never been seen or seen the light of day for the past potentially hundreds of millions of years. And whenever we would find a fossil, we would use the finer like sculpting tools or needles, things like that, to dig around it carefully. And we would also have to often douse it in glue so that it wouldn't absolutely disintegrate itself as we tried to get it out, which unfortunately tended to happen quite frequently. And once we did successfully remove the fossil from the rock, we would pack them up and label them. And any larger or more recognizable fossils that could be identified just on the spot would be also logged with their GPS coordinates of where they were found. And we even got the opportunity to do some fossil preparation, for which we used Dremel tools, which are not the ideal tool to use, but it was the best that we had, so it was something. And then after each of the digs, all of the specimens would be taken back to their respective universities and natural history museums for storage and further research. So we found basically everything there was to be found in these localities. So that's, bits of limb, bits of skull, vertebrae, teeth, pelvic and pectoral girdles, just about everything. And in Poland, I was particularly happy to find this etosaur rib, which that's it there once I fully excavated. But the first thing I actually saw of it was up in the corner over there of this tiny little piece of bone. And well, I was quite happy with that because etosaurs are some of my favorite Triassic animals, as well as phytosaurs. And in fact, the first fossil that I found in Poland was that phytosaur vertebrate that I accidentally splintered with my hammer and then had to glue back together because it was not actually in the bone bed it was supposed to be in. And additionally, in Hungary, I found 2 pieces of like a crocodile relative skull, and the experts there told me that it was a very significant find because the presence of this species in that locality has some quite important paleoecological implications. And now the Hungarian research team is working on cleaning it up and describing it and adding it to the PhD of one of the guys that was actually at this dig. And additionally, in Poland, I found this mysterious fossil here, which the experts there weren't really able to identify straight away. And so they gave me the permission to take it back here to Edinburgh to properly clean it up with the proper tools and then hopefully identify it if I can properly remove all the matrix from around it. And I'll be getting to work on that as soon as I can. And finally, I would like to say thank you to Jakub Kowalski and Otila Oshi for organizing these expeditions and providing such a unique and amazing experience for someone like me who has been able to get out into the field and actually do paleontology from the source of paleontology. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you all for coming. My name is Adam and I am studying dinosaur brains and how they change over time. I'm studying all kinds of dinosaurs, but the main group I've been working on are ceratopsian dinosaurs, which are these guys here. They're big herbivorous rhino-like animals, plant eaters, and the later ones all had these big skulls with big frills and big horns. But we don't know much about their brains, so I've been working on them. And I'm using Triceratops as my example, so that's why he's up there. I've also realised that I didn't put any of my logos for funding and whatnot, so I'd like to thank Dirk for doing that. I'll remember for next time. So you may be asking me, Adam, how on earth can we look at a dinosaur brain? As Emma was telling us, we've only been finding hard parts of fossil animals, and you'd be absolutely right. Normally only the hard parts preserve the bones and the teeth, but they can still tell us a lot about all of the soft tissues that would have been attached to them and been associated with them, and especially the bones of the brain case, because they would have been surrounding the brain and it would have been moulded and shaped by it. So here we can see the brain cavity in the middle of this brain case of a Triceratops. So we have something we can use to figure out what the brain looked like, but how do we get to it? Because back in William Buckland's day, they would have just had to smash it open or find it broken to actually have a look inside. But today we can use CT scans just like the ones you get in a hospital to x-ray it and peer inside without actually having to break it open or anything like that. So that's what I've been using, these CT scans to look inside, and then we can use computer software to highlight the brain cavity, and from that we can build 3D models for it. So what does this 3D model actually look like? Here we are. So this is the brain. So in the purple here, we've got the actual brain part from the brain cavity. And all of these yellow bits are the cranial nerves, which are feeding information into it. The red are the blood vessels that are giving the blood to the brain. And then these turquoise bits are actually the bits of the inner ear that are still preserved. So we have a brain. What can that tell us? What does this actually tell us about this animal? Well, different parts of the brain control different functions and are associated with processing different bits of sensory information. For example, the olfactory bulbs, which are at the front, no guess as to what that is. That is for processing your sense of smell. And for Triceratops, it is incredibly small. Very, very small. You can see the bulbs on either side, but normally you'd actually see like a bulbous structure at the back, at the front here. So the fact that they're very small means that for Triceratops, its sense of smell probably wasn't very important to it in its everyday life. Here we have the cerebrum, and now this is normally the biggest part of the brain, and it is the center for your thinking and your planning. It's taking in all of your information and helping you to make decisions. And again, it's very, very small. Normally you'd expect it to be very big and swollen, and it's the biggest part in our brains, but here it's not very big. And that's the trend you get as we go back through this brain. It's not very well expanded, so it probably means that its senses, incorporating all the sensory information, probably wasn't very important to it. It was instead relying on that big skull and that big body to survive instead of trying to outsmart its predators. So I'm saying it's not very smart, but what does that actually mean? Like, how smart were dinosaurs compared to modern animals? Well, as you can imagine, it can get pretty complicated, but the main points that we think about when we're studying this kind of thing is relative brain to body size. So as humans here, we have a really big brain compared to our body sizes, and we're one of the most intelligent animals on the planet. Similarly, the elephant also has a really big brain compared to its body size, but the T-Rex brain is very small. So we can say that that can help tell us what the cognition of all of these animals are based on how big the brain is. The other important part, of course, is the actual processing part of the brain, the cerebrum, which I've labelled with these arrows. In the elephant, it's really, really big, but in the T-Rex, it's actually a lot smaller compared to the rest of the brain. So if it's a lot smaller, it wasn't as important for this animal. So we can, again, make the inference that it wasn't quite as clever as these elephants were. So all in all, these dinosaurs were probably intelligent crocodiles, or about the same as a crocodile. But of course, as new discoveries keep being made, hopefully we're going to keep learning even more about the brains of these fantastic animals.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Millie, and today I am going to share with you some of the exciting new discoveries we've made about the evolution of the forelimb in these bizarre bird-like dinosaurs called oviraptorosaurs. So oviraptorosaurs are members of a much bigger group of dinosaurs called the theropods. Theropod dinosaurs include things like T-Rex, Velociraptor, and eventually modern birds. And throughout this entire group, we see repeated examples of forelimb shortening accompanied by the loss of one or more digits. So this happens in a whole range of dinosaurs, from huge carnivores like T-Rex and Carnotaurus, all the way down to much, much smaller dinosaurs like Mononychus, which if any of you guys have seen Prehistoric Planet, you'll recognize. Like Emma, a whole bunch of my text has gone missing. So this is credited. So we see it in a whole range of dinosaurs. And this has led a lot of researchers to assume that there's some sort of link between the reduction of the forelimb and the loss of the digits. However, in a lot of groups which underwent this process, we actually don't have an amazing fossil record. So we don't have a lot of data that we can use to actually test this assumption. So it's never been tested before. That is where my oviraptorosaurs come in. So oviraptorosaurs are really bizarre dinosaurs. They aren't actually direct ancestors of birds, but they share a lot of common features. So you can see they've got those feathers with a long quill running through the middle. They've got beaks with no teeth. And we even have some amazing fossils of preserved brooding and nest building behavior, which you can see on the screen over there. These dinosaurs would have been exceptionally diverse throughout the late Cretaceous. So they ranged in size from about a chicken all the way up to a fully grown giraffe. But what makes these guys so interesting and so important is that they have a lot of beautiful fossils. So we've got a lot of data to work from. We've got multiple skeletons that are really complete, preserved in lifelike postures. And that makes them a perfect group for starting to use statistics to actually test some of these questions. As you can see, most of these guys have pretty elongated forelimbs with 3 long fingers, but there is one key exception to that rule. So this is Oxoko. Oxoko is a member of the group called the Heyuaninae. So this group expanded, from southern China into the Gobi Desert in Mongolia during the late Cretaceous. It would have been about the size of a Labrador, probably primarily ate plants. But what makes this dinosaur so interesting are its really pathetic, tiny little forearms that you can see up there. So this is actually currently the only known functionally didactyl oviraptorosaur. And what that means is, instead of 3 digits like all the other oviraptorosaurs, its 3rd digit has been reduced just to this pretty pathetic vestigial splint on the end. So that means it's totally useless. You wouldn't have been able to see it when the animal was alive. And the discovery of Oxoko, in combination with the extreme data-rich group that is the oviraptorosaurs, makes these guys a perfect case study to start to test our assumption about whether digit loss is actually fundamentally linked to forelimb reduction. And what I've found is that it is not. So when I compared the length of the forelimb to the length of that 3rd digit in oviraptorosaurs, there is no correlation that I can find. So what this means is that 3rd digit is being lost independently of the rest of the forearm becoming shorter. So if these 2 things aren't related and the loss of the digit isn't linked to the shortening of the forelimb, what is going on here? Why is it losing that 3rd digit? Well, when we look at the pattern of evolution in oviraptorosaurs, what we see is that the start of the reduction of that 3rd digit coincides with a specific group of oviraptorosaurs expanding their range from southern China into the Gobi Desert. And you guessed it, that's the Heyuaninae. So that's the group that Oxoko belongs to. And what this implies to me is that this change is likely to be adaptive. So as the Heyuaninae expanded into the Gobi Desert, they would have come across new environments, new habitats, and new selection pressures. And something about this new environment was selecting for and favoring dinosaurs which had shorter 3rd digits, eventually leading to their loss. This shows us that the oviraptorosaur forelimb is much more adaptable than we initially thought it was, and leads us to question whether this adaptability, so the malleability of the forelimb, could have actually contributed to the enormous success of this group in the late Cretaceous, whether it could have allowed them to diversify and become so speciose. So some takeaway messages from today is that forelimb evolution is way more complex than we initially thought it was in the oviraptorosaurs. However, we still don't know much about the evolution of the forelimb in other dinosaurs. So the kind of best next steps for this research is to try and find another group of theropods which we can apply these methods to see whether oviraptorosaurs are just being weird as usual and doing something different, or whether the rest of the dinosaurs are following the same trend. Thanks very much.
Let's have a little chat. Great. So thank you all. That's fantastic. Really fun for me to see. Not only, I mean, the great research we know that you guys do, because, well, it's kind of my job is to keep tabs on your research, but how well you all did speaking in front of a big crowd like this. So well done. I hope this gives everybody a sense of two things. First of all, the dinosaurs of Scotland and what we know about Scottish dinosaurs and what we're finding here, and then what the next generation of paleontologists is doing, where the field is going since the time of Buckland and since the time of that first dinosaur footprint being found in Scotland. And what I think is particularly neat about this group here, we have Emma, who's still an undergrad, still an undergrad. Doesn't even have any degree yet. Isn't that amazing? Up here at the Royal Society of Edinburgh as an undergrad. Millie, just finished her master's, and the work that she presented was her master's work, and is starting her PhD this week. And luckily, we persuaded Millie to stick around. And then Adam is a PhD student, in his second year. So you're seeing a span of young scholars, young scientists, the future of paleontology. So we're going to give you all the opportunity to ask questions of everybody up here in a minute, but there's a couple of things that I want to just chat with you guys about. And I'd like to hear from each of you, and I think it'd be interesting for you all to hear as well, a little bit about your background. Why is it, of all the things in the world you could be doing, why are you here in Edinburgh studying paleontology? What is it about fossils? So we can go Emma, Millie, Adam, I think.
Well, I've always loved the natural world in all aspects since I was the smallest of children. And I remember specifically a moment, I think I was 11 years old. I looked at one of my dinosaur models and I thought, dinosaurs are really cool. and so just from that, they just became a fixation. And so everything, basically every academic decision I've done from lower school onwards has just been, how do I get to paleontology? This way, okay, I'm doing this. And that's how I ended up here in Edinburgh, because, well, the university has an excellent paleontology department, and I figured it would be probably one of the best opportunities for me to be able to actually become a paleontologist.
That we won over your parents with the lab tour we did.
Oh yeah, of course, because
visit.
a few years before I started my degree, I came up here to Edinburgh with my family and met Steve and had a lab tour and everything, and so Steve never lost me after that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like most paleontologists that you talk to, when you ask them, like, oh, why did you get into it? They're like, I was obsessed with it as a kid. And I'm definitely not any different to that. So my favorite game, I don't know how old I was. My parents are there, so they can probably tell you. But probably before I could say most other words, my favorite game was I had this little box of plastic dinosaurs, and they all had their names written on the bottom of them. And I would make my mum for hours. She would hold up a dinosaur and I would tell her what it was called. And she would check on the bottom, yeah, that's the right. And then she'd pick up the next one, I'd tell her what that was called. And yeah, it kind of started from there. I was two. There you go.
No, could she spell that? She couldn't spell the names of two, right?
Yeah. So I...
the things I learn about my students in public.
So I started doing, I was loved biology at school, and then when I was at school, I read Steve's book, and at 13 I was like, oh, I'm going to email this dude who wrote this book, because I like this. And Steve has the patience of a saint and respond to every single one of my emails. Yeah. And then eventually, I think I was in sixth form, you gave a video talk to my school because I was like, yeah, I know this dinosaur guy. So yeah, it was kind of from there, and then. So
you'd recommend The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs?
Yeah, absolutely. This is great.
In the crowd and online, right?
Definitely read that.
Listen to Millie, not to the 1-star reviews on Amazon.
1 star. Oh man. Yeah, no, definitely read it if you've not read it already. And then, yeah, when I was finishing up I did a biology degree at Sheffield, and when I was finishing up with that, I emailed Steve and I was like, oh, I'm thinking about, I don't know if you remember me, I've been bugging you for probably 10 years now, but I don't know whether to go down to Bristol and do the course there, or whether to come up to Edinburgh and do my master's at Edinburgh. And he was like, nah, bin off Bristol, come to Edinburgh, don't.
I did my master's in Bristol. So.
Yeah, because well, I was like, you're gonna know best because you've been to both, and yeah, and then that's how I ended up here.
So I'm from Leicester, which has a pretty good geology and paleontology department. So when I was choosing what degree to go to, I got in contact. I think I emailed every single person on the faculty in the geology department in Leicester and said, hey, do you need a grunt to do some lab work for you? And one person emailed back and said, yeah, you can cut up some fish scales for me. So I went and did that, and I really enjoyed doing all of this science work. So that was kind of it, and I thought, yep, I'm definitely going to go and do paleontology. Because, like everyone here, I've just been interested in it since I was a kid. I think I kind of had a phase in my teenage years where I looked at doing other things, but then I came back to it when I chose to go to uni. So I went to the University of Birmingham, and I did an integrated master's there for 4 years. I then had a year out applying for PhDs, and then I applied for this one with Steve, and now I'm here. And I don't know where the time's gone.
Yeah, about that. I know. You still got plenty of time.
I got plenty of time.
And still lots of data to compile. We'll get on it. No. So Adam's, project is, as he presented, a big one. He talked about the basics of CT scanning and horned dinosaur brains. But really what Adam's doing is all dinosaur brains, looking at the trends in brain evolution across the entire family tree, across time. And so it's compiling tons and tons and tons and tons of data, which is both exciting, but I know daunting and frustrating at times.
It's a lot of
people don't
emailing.
share data. So scientists out there, share your data. And we've recruited Millie onto that same general broad project. We have a big project with colleagues who are cognitive biologists and neurobiologists. Together, we're trying to pool our expertise and the expertise and the skills of our students to understand how cognition evolved over time, which is quite fun. I want to ask one more thing of the three of you before we open it up for questions. And I'm curious what you all think when you look back to the days of Buckland, or even to, say, 10 years ago, when I was starting my job here and just knowing about the sort of research that was being done at the time, what you see as the biggest, newest, most interesting developments in the field over, say, the last decade, the time that you guys have been interested in this and thinking about pursuing this as a career and starting to pursue it as a career?
Well, I probably thought about pursuing this as a career during the last 10 years, because I'm not old enough to have done it before then.
You weren't doing your dinosaurs at 2, okay,
I was doing dinosaurs and other things. I was not career-minded at 5 years old, unfortunately.
That's okay.
But, yeah, advances in the field, I would say things like the insane rate at which technology has developed, and even things when I read papers now on maybe a particularly niche topic, and I see this some kind of technology or method that they've used for, their research and coming to their conclusions, and I think, you can do that? Wow, I didn't know that. And yeah, I would say, but then I suppose that I have been keeping up to date with the field for about as long as, I haven't experienced any primitive Buckland style research.
You haven't met anybody who has their own pet bear in their house?
Unfortunately not. I haven't experienced any sort of old school things like that, but of course I read about it, hear about it from others, and to be honest, that sounds like they were pretty fun times as well.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the discovery of like pigment in dinosaur feathers. I mean, it's probably a bit of like a basic one to go for, but I just remember reading that for the first time in like one of Michael Benton's books, and I was like, that's incredible. Like that you can, because yeah, I mean, people like constantly ask me with it's like with Oxoco, like that I showed right at the top. They show it with like a blue face, and they're like, oh well, did it actually have that color? Like, is that? And with Oxoco, we can't say for sure. We don't have any like fossilized pigment, but they used something called a scanning electron microscope, which basically uses electrons instead of visible light. So you can see stuff that's even smaller than you can see with a normal microscope. And they found these like impressions of pigment molecules. And they look really similar to what we get today in like modern day birds in the feathers of dinosaurs, which had been like preserved. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty incredible. That, yeah, kind of brings it to life in a different way.
You've stolen my answer.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No. So I went to the open day at the University of Bristol, and I spoke to Jacob Vinther, who authored a load of these papers, and he gave me it to read. And I remember taking it everywhere with me. I took it to the hairdressers once. I was just sat there waiting for my brother to finish getting his haircut, and I was just reading it back and forth. I read it cover to cover so many times, and yes, that kind of, and what you were saying with like technology and how you can just look at and figure out these things of the things that have been dead for over 65 million years, and all of these new things that we can do to do it. So yeah, I absolutely agree with both of you. And then of course the amount of just data we have now, because it's been 200 years, we just have so many fossils now, we can do some amazing analyses with just the sheer quantity with them as well. So that's pretty good.
Actually, sorry if I can.
No,
some of the reason that I didn't, so my kind of main like interest is actually like in like statistics and like the boring like maths stuff, which is weird because I hate maths. But so a lot of the statistical methods that we use to study these dinosaurs, now that we have like so much more data on them, were developed like 50 odd years ago. Like the stuff that we're using actually is pretty like foundational to our understanding of like evolution. We're just taking those same methods and applying them, and actually I think that's really cool as well. It's not just like the new stuff, but also everything that kind of came before that we're still using on a regular basis, and that's like built the foundation for what we're doing now.
I think for me, it's just amazing to see how quickly the field has moved and continues to move. And I'm probably one of the last of like the generation of, pure bone hunter describing fossils type of paleontologist. Although I don't feel horribly old. I mean, having the round number birthday, losing my hair at a faster rate, becoming part of the Royal Society. I guess it's a sign. Maybe I'm entering that stage of my career. But a lot of these things that these guys are very fluent in, or becoming fluent in, using high-level statistics, basically being computer programmers to do that kind of work. CT scan work, becoming wizards at using software to see the details in these X-ray scans. And so many other things, that's just normal in paleontology now. It's normal. You can't really be a student without learning those things. I didn't have to learn those things at the level that they do now. That's how fast the field is moving. That's an exciting thing, because these are all new tools and new techniques. These are things that William Buckland would have had no idea about. But I think it also gives us a lot of excitement looking forward. And so we are doing a lot of work in our group now, for instance, using AI techniques to study dinosaur footprints, classify dinosaur footprints, try to identify the footprints we find on sky. So we're always testing out new things. But I think that's enough of our lecturing. So I like to open it up to questions, and I think we will take some here to start, and then we will go online. And I know Hannah will be doing the online ones. Christine, let's, what do you got? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, welcome. It's great to have you here with us. It's great to see the next generation. We pretty much exhausted Steve.
put me out to
He's got more
pasture.
life left in him, yeah.
Yeah,
A little bit, yeah.
It's been 4 years.
Do we want to use the mic, I guess? Yeah, let's do that so people online can hear.
So yeah, yet again, welcome to Edinburgh. Thank you for coming. It's great to have you. I have questions basically for all three of us. For Emma, first of all, this mysterious jaw that you're going to look into, do you have any guess what it could be? And secondly, what is that T-shirt? That looks amazing.
So the jaw is very probably a jaw because as I was digging it out, it just kept coming out in little chunks, as you could see on the picture. It's just loads of little sections going down, and you could see occasionally these pits, like where the tooth socket essentially. And when I took it back to the boss man, he said, "Oh, it's probably a jaw. I'm not sure of what of." It could be a very deformed metaposaur jaw, which is one of those giant, like, amphibians that would just eat the things that would wander too close to the water. It's very probably one of those because Metaposaurus was basically most of what we found there. So it's very probably one of those, but it'd be very cool if it was something else, if it was something new. Because officially there's no dinosaurs from this site. The closest thing we have is this Coelosaurus, which is a dinosaur relative. So it's very close. Sometimes it's classified as a dinosaur, sometimes not. But for now, it's nearly a dinosaur. But Jakub, who was the guy in charge there, he said to me that he's found dinosaur teeth here. They just haven't been described. So
Tell him to get on that.
oh yeah, he said that people don't want to describe stuff just based on like the random teeth. Which
We do that. We do that all the time on Sky.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was like,
We
I'm
have several
surprised-
papers on isolated dinosaur
Yeah, we need to
teeth
get
from
the
Sky.
we need to get the Spinosaur people to Crashel to start identifying things based on a tiny fragment. But yeah, he said, like, I'd happily go and describe stuff there if he lets me. And yeah, this T-shirt is of the Hungarian. Is this year's Hungarians dig merch, I guess, and it features the Hungarosaurus, which is Hungarian lizard, which was found in this locality, and actually one of the what we found pictures at the bottom, the pelvis plus vertebrae, that's of a probably not of this exact animal, but of a very similar animal. And yeah, that's what this T-shirt is, representing the research group. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. The next would be Adam, regarding the comparison of the size of dinosaur brains and mammal brains. I seem to remember that to have read somewhere that bird brains have a different structure. They kind of are wired in a different way and might therefore be much more efficient compared to size. So could that apply to dinosaur brains as well?
Absolutely, yes. It is one of the big caveats that we're looking at in our research group, but it's not something my research is going to be able to focus on just because it's a bit too far out of the scope. But yeah, at some point in the as theropod dinosaurs evolved into birds, their brains probably the amount of neurons in it probably increased by like tenfold or something. So but being able to place that is going to be very, very tricky, and it's something that we're going to be looking at in the future. So yes, you're absolutely right, but we're not quite sure yet. So.
Oh yeah, do the rest after. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed for an excellent talk for everybody. Having visited Durmhillier in Alberta, what plans have Edinburgh got for actually developing some kind of dinosaur centre we can actually go and visit and see some of these incredible things that you've been doing, the general public?
Well, Drumheller in Alberta, which is an amazing place, sits on the Badlands. And the curators of that museum, a few of them are friends of mine, they will sometimes go out on their lunch break and just take a little walk and find a dinosaur. On my lunch break, I read ESPN. They're in the middle of dinosaur country, and there's loads of dinosaurs. It's one of the richest areas of the world, and that museum was built in the 80s, and it's a royal museum. The Queen went there to dedicate it, and it's one of the world's best. They would find more fossils in a single day than we've ever found of dinosaurs in Scotland. Sadly, that's just the reality there. So building some kind of huge museum here, we wouldn't just have the fossils yet. The fossils we collect, by the way, go to the National Museum of Scotland. They all go into the permanent collection. And some may or may not be put on display in the future. Hopefully the pterosaur will be. But then on Skye, there's the Stafford Museum that Doogie Ross runs. It is a museum he built himself from the ruins of a 19th century schoolhouse. And it's a small museum. Some of you have probably been there. It's a small museum, but a very charming museum. And it has fossils and rocks, but it also has a lot of historical artifacts, cultural artifacts, things from the history of Skye, from the history of crofting. Doogie himself is a crofter. And so in the future, I would love for there to be some kind of bigger museum, more formal museum on Skye. That's probably something that with the right ambition, the right funding, it might require some, a decent amount of, private benefactor support. That's something that I think would be feasible and would be pretty awesome. And so, by the way, we're giving Doogie Ross an honorary degree in November here from the University of Edinburgh, which we're very pleased about, very happy about. And but all props to Doogie for building that museum, and we'll see where the future goes, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, tell us, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can technically have two things, actually. The first one is referring to the thing about the digits, for instance. There's evil... Sorry, just getting my bearings. Basically, evolution sometimes has some weird little trends, like in mammals, for instance. Mammals seem to be stuck to 7 neck vertebrae. And in archosaurians, like crocodilians, pterosaurs, dinosaurs, etc., they seem to have a weird thing where, even where it's 5 fingers, only 3 of them have nails, so to speak. Mm-hmm. What do you make about that?
So I'm not sure about, obviously mammals and the other groups you've mentioned, just because obviously they're outside of my kind of scope.
Of course.
With Oxoco, so the biggest thing that we were looking at was trying to either prove or disprove this hypothesis that the digit was actually linked to the forelimb reduction, right? So a lot of people say it's like a quirk of evolution that as these forelimbs are getting smaller, they're probably being used less. So you're not putting as much energy into growing them. People argue that it's like a passive process, right? And as part of that, if you are no longer using your forelimbs, you probably don't need your fingers either. So maybe that's why they were losing their digits.
Sorry.
Yeah, you go for it.
Well, of course, it varies slightly depending on the species and in what way they're using their forelimbs. Prehistoric Planet demonstrated the idea that Carnotaurus may have used its tiny arms as a display feature.
Yeah, so actually, you're kind of coming close to something that we think might be a theory about Oxoco. So the loss of that third digit, we think might be related to the feathers on the arm. So it's got a line of feathers, kind of like wings, but not obviously used for flight, that come along here. And then if you follow the line of feathers up the arm, they go up the second finger. So if you have a third finger, it's probably in the way of those feathers. So currently we don't have a way of proving it. I'm not sure how you'd test that, but it's kind of a cool idea. Maybe if that third digit's getting in the way of your display feathers that you're using to attract a mate or to shade your eggs or any one of those things, maybe that's why they're losing that third digit.
It could also be said, with what I said again about the nail thing, why a good portion of dinosaurs have 3 prominent fingers. instead of, say, 5 prominent fingers, for instance?
Yeah, so that's related to a developmental mechanism. So I looked into this a little bit as part of my thesis as well, where basically the way that your fingers decide which finger they're going to be is they do it based off the concentration of one signaling molecule. So if the signaling molecule is produced here, this finger gets loads of signaling molecule, whereas this finger doesn't really get any. So based on how much of that molecule is there, it knows, okay, I'm the first finger, the second finger, the third finger, whatever. So in oviraptorosaurs, and we think in dinosaurs, like theropod dinosaurs more broadly, they lost their digits from the outside going in. So they always lose the same digits. Or in most cases, they lose the same digits. And we think it's because of a signaling molecule that's similar to the ones that we see in modern day birds.
Interesting. My second thing is, of course, referring to the brain thing, which is a similar point to that. Sorry, I forgot the name of the woman earlier, but basically, well, like she said about how bird brains are likely structured a fair bit differently to mammals. Ironically, people used to call the birds bird-brained as in stupid, even though a lot of birds are now understood to be quite intelligent. But the main point I'm trying to get at is when it was compared to a crocodile, my thought immediately brought up points more recently about how crocodiles have been found to be surprisingly intelligent in their own right, such as being able to recognize their own name, for instance, or showing clear signs of play behavior, for instance. Or you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. There's a video of me on my phone of me butchering a Old Norse name for an alligator as I'm calling it out of the water to feed it a chicken, which is one of the highlights of trip last year. But no, you're absolutely right. Crocodiles, reptiles in that area, they have so much behavior that is very understudied compared to birds and mammals who get all the fame for being big-brained and very intelligent. So it's absolutely one of the things that we should look out for that in my research, that just because it has a smaller brain doesn't necessarily mean it's stupid. It's probably capable of very complex behaviors. For example, the Triceratops had these big frills and whatnot. It's very possible they were being used in display as well as combat, and that suggests a social kind of interaction that they would have been capable of. Unfortunately, these are some of the things that we just can't get just from the brain at the moment.
So I'm just mindful we have a hard get out of here at 8. I want to make sure we get at least a few online from Hannah, and then and then we can do. Oh, hey there, yes.
Hello. What's the most interesting brain dinosaur brain you've studied, and why?
Oh, that's a good question. The most interesting one. I'm blanking on all of the ones I've looked at.
They're all good.
They're all good. They're all good. No, I'm not going to answer it like that. I'm really blanking here, aren't I? Dear
Chicken.
Me.
I don't know.
No, I think the most interesting one to me is there's a little ceratopsian dinosaur called Leptoceratops, which I scanned. And that little one is doing something very, very different to the Triceratops one in its anatomy, especially towards the back of the brain. And that's really interesting, and I'm not sure quite the differences there yet. So it's one of the things I'm going to be looking out for. So I'm probably going to say the little guy there. It's about a smaller relative. So
Good. Yeah, good choice. All right, Hannah, what do we got?
So I've got a couple from online. I think I'll ask 2 and let you answer them together, if that's all right. The first one, we've got a bit more of a general one, so I'm not sure who's going to take this. We've got, this is from Isabel saying, is Skye unique in Scotland for having dinosaurs, or do you expect to find fossils in other parts of Scotland that we maybe not found them in before? Mm-hmm. And then the second one is specifically for Adam from Alex, which is what software did you use for the modeling of your brains, and how do you differentiate the parts of the brain?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, well, I'll briefly answer the Sky one first. And Sky is almost unique. For a while, Sky was the only place. And I guess I should be looking here to you online. Skye was the only place in Scotland for a while where there were dinosaurs that were found, because there's very little rock from the Jurassic period or the Triassic or Cretaceous here in Scotland that preserves fossils of dinosaurs. It's exposed in areas where it can be accessed easily by people. Skye just hits that sweet spot. There are a few other places more recently where dinosaur footprints and other bits of dinosaurs have been found. We found a bone on the Isle of Eigg, which is very close to Skye, part of the same general area in the Jurassic, some of the same rocks, but we got dinosaurs on Eigg. Neil Clark, good friend of ours at the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow, who's done a lot of work over the years on the footprints on Skye, he found some tracks on the mainland over on the east coast. So there's a few other places here and there in Scotland, but by and large, Skye is the place with the most Jurassic Age rock that's exposed on the surface for us to look at, and that's why it's the sweet spot. Now you can talk about mimics.
Hi, Alex. So yes, the software I'm using is Materialized Mimics, which is actually medical software. And that's it loads in the CT scans, and then I basically do fancy colouring in all day to colour in the brain cavity, and that makes the model. The second part of the question was, how do I differentiate between the different brain regions? That's a great question. The different parts of the brain will have very unique structures. So if you can remember back to the model, and they'll also pretty much always be in the same place or a very similar place. So I can always know that at the front is going to be the olfactory bulbs, and then it's going to be followed by the cerebrum, and then the optic tectum, and then the cerebellum, because it's always structured in the same linear fashion. How do I differentiate it from the model? Sometimes it's really difficult because their brains aren't very expanded, and it's hard to tell where the limit is. But most of the time I can use the surrounding anatomy, like the cranial nerves and the blood vessels and things like that, to be able to figure out, okay, that's where the limit probably should be, and I can use that.
Do we have more online, or is... Yeah, why don't you do a couple more, just to... Or okay, yeah, no problem.
Hello, sorry, the anticipation's getting to me. Trying to formulate how to word this concisely. Basically, I'm a recent illustration graduate. I specialize in wildlife, speculative biology, and paleo art. Although most of my paleo art has been self-driven, I have drawn from some material from the National Museum storage and done a reconstruction from that because I haven't had a lot of time this year. Basically, my question is, I'm still learning, of course, but paleo art for me is intimidating because I come from an arts background rather than a science background. But I would love to work directly with people that are working with the material, especially if I can draw from the material in person. I find that helps a lot more with accuracy. I just was never sure how to approach something like that, how to work with people in the field that are working on the papers and things like that.
So that's great. That's great that you're interested in paleo art and you're doing paleo art. I won't profess to have any great knowledge. I'm like the world's worst artist. I swear. Like I'm horrible. So it's something I don't even quite grasp how you guys do what you do. I mean, we work with various paleo artists. So if we have some new discovery and we're going to announce it, and we need some artwork done to show what the living animal would have been like, or of course, we work with paleo artists when I do my books and so on. And there's just a big online community of paleo artists. That's probably the single biggest thing I would say, is just becoming part of that online community is probably the way to learn and to get to know people and get your art out there. Natalia, our former student who led the work on the pterosaur, she's a fantastic artist. She's somebody you can reach out to. She's quite easy to find online. And otherwise, if you want to see material, I mean, going into the museum collections, getting in touch with the actual museums, the places that have the fossils, that's the best thing you can do. So figure out who the curators are, get to know them, ask if you can see stuff, and just build it up from there.
Great, thank you.
That's what I say. Yep. And then
This question's for Adam, because I've seen you making the cranial models before, and it seems quite tedious. I was wondering if you, and time consuming. I was wondering if in the modern age of artificial intelligence starting to come in, if you could foresee that becoming quite useful in accelerating your research processes.
Absolutely, yes. I wouldn't say it's tedious, I would say it's meditative. And by that I mean I like to put a podcast on in the background. But no, you're absolutely right. It because the CT scans are going through, it basically, every image will look the same apart from a slight deviation. So you build it up over time. But you're absolutely right that AI and deep learning and stuff will be used in these CT scans, and they have been already. So there's been some papers out recently about how they've used using X-rays to use these models to make them learn how to segment it for you. I haven't done too much reading into it because I can't use AI by myself, so it's not really applicable for me. My only issue with it for the near future is that because CT scans can be quite volatile, they can vary quite a bit. So if something looks really different, it's going to confuse the model very quickly. So I'm not sure how quickly it's going to be used in the near future, but I definitely think it will be used in the future. So,
you have some more online? Yeah. Okay. Yep. Sure.
Hi. You guys kind of mentioned the ability to use these new technologies on a whole host of older fossils, not just newer ones. If you had any issues with sort of accessing, I guess, the kind of like back catalogue of all the fossils that have been discovered, whether they're in different countries or just the archiving, there's like millions of these you've got to go through. You guys had issues like going through these?
So, I mean, I can talk about Oak.
Sure. Yeah.
So, one of the biggest challenges that I came up against was that the fossil for Oxoko is in Mongolia. And obviously, on my fairly tiny master's budget, I couldn't fly to Mongolia to look at this fossil. So actually, the new technologies that you're talking about are really helpful for helping us study internationally. Because I was really lucky in that fossil had already been CT scanned, like Adam was saying. So I was able to go through and like segment the arms out, which means I've got like a virtual copy of that fossil on my computer. So that's really helpful. I think Adam's had a slightly different experience trying to access CT scans of fossils.
Slightly different, but for the most part, I'd say it's been exceedingly positive because to collect all of these data, I've been emailing people from all around the world. And from all around the world, people have been emailing me back saying, oh, that sounds so cool. Here it is for you. Let me know how it goes. Or I don't have it. This person does. Go and email them. Or I've CC'd them in so you can talk to them. It has been like the rare handful of people who just haven't gotten back to me and whatnot. And I've been finding it difficult to access their stuff. Everybody else has been, like 95% of people have been extraordinary in being so helpful and saying, oh, I've got even more stuff I can send you. So I would say it's been really positive. So.
All right. And you guys tell us, because I know we have a pretty solid ceiling at 8, so you tell us when you need to kick us off, okay?
I reckon we've got time for this one online and probably one more in the room.
Okay.
But this one online from Gary might be one for Emma and Steve, actually, to take a stab at. From Gary saying, do we believe that we actually have a hold on dinosaur diversity after 200 years? Or do you think we're just seeing the tip of a larger iceberg?
Oh, Gary. Well, I'd like to hear Emma's perspective just being in the field this summer first. Then I'll give you a slight little spiel. But I guess, you were digging a bunch of stuff up, and that's a real sense of, the raw data, the primary data, the actual fossils, and the reality of finding those.
So I would say we have a good idea, like a pretty good idea, definitely compared to the start of the dinosaur research science. But it's always you always need to keep in mind that the vast majority, like you're sampling an enormous, like an incomprehensible span of time, like not even just dinosaurs, like things before, the things after, everything. And you can only rely on like the Isle of Skye, on like very specific places that tick an insane amount of boxes for preservation quality, correct time period, correct sediment, and everything. So we definitely, like, for example, the Hungarian site I went to was far more diverse, I would say, than the Polish site that I was at. But then again, you can see the difference. The Hungarian site was much more heavily sampled, and it's got like a full research team backing it, while the Polish site was more just one guy out of passion going there for 20 years with volunteers, and it's just been kind of being neglected slightly, like all of this material that he finds, but there's barely any papers on this site, and they all describe the same 6 species basically. And also there's some environments that just don't really fossilize. If you think about like everything in the sea, unless it was something that was in the sea that then ended up on land, like as in the seafloor ended up on land, you're not going to know about it. Like even on a wider scale, like oceanic plates are subducted, like those fossils will just be gone forever. You will never find them. So it's nice to think that we know so much about what we study and what we learn about, but then in the back of your head, you're always thinking, this is a tiny amount of what was really there. Yeah.
I would just say that in order to know that a dinosaur species existed, somebody has to find it. Somebody has to go somewhere and see its bones sticking out of the rock. And we know of about 2,000 species of dinosaur, give or take. That's a lot, I guess, that have been found in the last 200 years. But you think about today, birds they're dinosaurs. They're living dinosaurs. They're part of the dinosaur family. And there's over 10,000 species of birds just alive today. So when you multiply that out, you think about all the other dinosaurs, lived over 150 plus million years. There were surely a lot more than 2,000 species. So it means there's a lot more still to be found. I think we have like a decent handle on the general story of dinosaur diversity over time, but people are still finding a new species once a week on average. So there's still a lot more to be found. All right, we got one more from inside the room, I think. Who do we got? Yeah, I'm not sure where the mic is. I think it all depends on who has the microphone. All right.
Hello. Yeah, what about plesiosaurs? Obviously, we've got the Loch Ness Monster story for Scotland. Our most famous.
Oh, why didn't we end with the last
Our most famous
question?
dinosaur. So, what evidence do we have of plesiosaurs being anywhere near Loch Ness at any time?
Okay. I better handle that. That's kind of a my pay grade question. So plesiosaurs are a type of reptile. They're a different group of reptile than dinosaurs. They're one of those cousin groups. And they did live here in Scotland. We have fossils of plesiosaurs from the Isle of Skye. We actually have one. Is Jack back there? Yeah, there's Jack. So Jack, we have like much of our, so I see Izzy, I see Carly, I see David, I see Ross. And sorry if I can't see everybody, but this our new master's cohort has just started this week. So welcome. But Jack's come from Canada, and he's studying a fossil of a plesiosaur in a big boulder we found near the power station on Skye at Berwick Bay. And there's other plesiosaurs from Skye, and there's a big bone bed of plesiosaurs on the Isle of Eigg, and so they did live here. And for those of you that don't know of plesiosaurs, they're reptiles that lived in the ocean. They were kind of near the top of the food chain, fish eaters and so on, long before there were big sharks and killer whales and stuff. So they were Jurassic and apex predators. They went extinct in the Cretaceous. And although they lived here way back then, the whole Loch Ness thing, I don't know. I'm not a historian or not a kind of cultural anthropologist or anything. But that legend has grown. How that legend was linked to a plesiosaur, I don't actually know. I'm sure this has been studied. Maybe somebody saw the long neck of something and they linked it to a plesiosaur. But long story short, I mean, Loch Ness is a glacial lake. It was formed during the last ice age. It's about 10,000 years old. So no, there have been no plesiosaurs in Scotland any time near that time. But the important thing is, though, that they did used to live here. There were plesiosaurs here. So there were, I guess you could think about it as like, ancient and very real cousins of the Loch Ness Monster. We're actually here in Scotland. So hey, there we go. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. So a big thanks to everybody. Thanks for coming out. Sorry, I know we couldn't get to all the questions, but we'll be filing out and you can catch us then. Just big thanks for coming out here on a nice, cool autumn evening. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.